Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is the midweek episode. Inter Miami is 3 points away from breaking the points record. They have already clinched the Supporters' Shield and thus home field advantage in the entire playoffs. It's a good time to be in Inter Miami. Heron, it's a good time to have the international break because we're on a high. We're feeling good about the team, but it also means there's not a ton to talk about. So today we decided, let's have a little bit of fun, do a little bit of dreaming, think forward, really get into what could happen in the future without having to worry about the nitty-gritty of what's happening right now. And so we decided, let's just have a conversation about the Club World Cup. But before we do, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling this evening, my man?
I am great as always, Scotty. And every time I tell you that I hate the international break and it's awful and there's no soccer to watch and it's just boring all around. But today I'm going to deviate from the script and tell you I'm kind of glad the international break is here because Inter Miami finished in a winning note. So that's all up and up. Vibes are good. We're feeling good about our club. And also it's nice to have a little bit of a break. It was a lot of games back to back to back to back. And I think it's time for the players, the coaches, and the fans to just sit back, relax a little bit, and kick on into the next half of the season, which is essentially going to be the most important 2-3 months of Inter Miami's season. So I'm kind of glad that we're on a bit of a break. I'm refreshed and I'm ready to go, and always ready to speculate about the future. So.
Yeah, and this is sort of the last break until the season's over because next weekend we'll come back, we'll play New England, and then we'll immediately turn our attention to that 8-9 game and see who we're going to play in the first round. And then it's just playoffs until we win the trophy, right? And so this is our last opportunity to sort of take a deep breath and appreciate everything that's happened so far and everything that we have achieved and unlocked because of what we've done so far. There are a couple things I wanted to mention before we get into that discussion. The first is I wanted to say to everyone that is in South Florida or in Florida generally that is dealing with over the next couple of hours or in the next day or so, this Hurricane Milton that's coming through, please be safe. And we wish you the best. And hopefully it's not as bad as, some of the storms in the past. It looks like it's going to miss South Florida for the most part, but if we have any listeners in sort of the Tampa area or Central Florida, please be safe. Okay, Inter Miami. First thing, the 22 under 22 came out today, and I don't know if you got a chance to look at this yet, but Inter Miami had 5 players that were selected in the 22 under 22 list for the MLS, and that includes number 1 overall, Diego Gomez. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when the ballots were going in. It felt like Diego Gomez was the clear favorite to win, to become number 1, but he did. Inter Miami did a little thing with his family, and they put it on social media. So if you guys want to see a cute little thing where his family is the one that tells him and he gets all emotional, you can check that out on their social media pages. But it's not just Gomez. Federico Redondo finishes number 5. Benjamin Kramaski finishes number 6. Toto Aviles finishes number 12, and I'm sure it would be even higher if he played 3 or 4 or 6 more games that he was suspended for. And then also David Ruiz comes in at number 21, which is basically an incredible for Inter Miami to have 5 of the top 22. A lot of opposing fans will often say phrases like, you bought it, you didn't build it. Well, having 5 young players, that especially some that came through the academy, come in and appear on a list like this is really special. Noah Allen and Ian Frey, 2 guys that also probably could have been under consideration. And maybe, especially of late, Noah Allen maybe had deserved it. Ian Frey, we think the world of, but maybe he doesn't have quite the number of minutes he would need to get into a list like this. But still, 5 Herons make this list. Really, really incredible.
Is that the maximum from any other team? Should be. I don't expect any other team to put out that many good quality under 22s. So I'm expecting Inter Miami to top that list as well. Listen, this is a big testament to the kind of trust and the kind of impetus and the kind of value we've placed as a club in our youth over the last couple of seasons. The fact that we have 5 upcoming stars in this list with a potential debate for even more. I could fight people to have Noah Allen and Ian Frey on this list as well. And to have the number one U22 player from our club in Diego Gomez is a big, big achievement. Another one of those jewels in our crown this season that we've constantly spoken about, because I know you and I both really value having Messi on this team and the kind of talent that we have in terms of our veteran experience. But along with that, we also value giving some of the youth players an opportunity to play and an opportunity to showcase what they're capable of. And I think this season, Tata Martino, the coaching staff, has really helped some of these players emerge into their own. And it's a moment of pride, and I'm glad for every single one of those players that's on the list, not just Diego Gomez. And then speaking of Diego Gomez, man, last season he was not even in the conversation. And look at him this season. He's essentially the I would say top 3 players in the starting lineup, other than our Barcelona boys. So phenomenal recovery from last season, has had a brilliant season, and hopefully he can kick on from here. And I'm sure he's got plenty of height to scale. So wish him the luck for his future, and we'll see where he goes after this. But brilliant, brilliant news for Inter Miami overall.
Yeah, and I was just looking through quickly. I don't think anyone has more than 2 or 3. I think Philadelphia has 3 players on this list, which looks like the second most. The guys that made this list are, especially in the top half, are real impact players. Jack McGlynn for the Union, Diego Luna for Real Salt Lake, Brian Gutierrez for the Chicago Fire, Obed Vargas, Quinn Sullivan, Jalen Neal, Asmir Baraktarevich. These are some really, really good, important pieces for their teams. Down the list, there's a couple players that are more hype and potential than actual production. You do have guys like Kevin Sullivan, the 15-year-old, David Martinez for LAFC, who hasn't played a ton, Christian McFarland for NYCFC, guys that have had sort of not enough minutes to maybe earn this spot based on production, but is more based on potential. But in that sense, still great to have 5 guys that feel like they've all earned this because of what they've actually done on the field. Okay. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the MLS announced their new calendar updates, which is the off-season updates, right? And so the Super Draft, the MLS expansion draft, as you guys may remember, the MLS is expanding next year to include San Diego FC. So there will be the expansion draft. That is something that Inter Miami is going to have to worry about because of our squad depth. We did lose Indiana Vasilev to the expansion draft to St. Louis City a couple years ago. So that can be a little bit of a sticky situation. We'll have to pay close attention to it. And then the Super Draft, which is, of course, what we got, where we got Yannick Bright. That's going to be on Friday, December 20th. And the start of free agency is Thursday, December 12th. So a couple updates on Inter Miami and MLS. And that's all I got, man. Anything else you wanted to talk about before we get into this sort of larger conversation?
Dude, we've come such a long way. We're already almost done with the season and thinking about what the transfer moves look like for next season as well. Can you imagine picking another Yannick Bright level talent in the Super Draft, or how this Inter Miami team is going to shape up in the next transfer window? So many things to talk about, but I think for now we keep our feet on the ground, focus on the MLS Cup, and talk about the Club World Cup 2025, baby.
Yeah, so it was reported the day after Inter Miami won the Supporters Shield by Ben Jacobs, who is a British soccer journalist, that CONCACAF and FIFA were going to give that spot to the Supporters Shield winners. And yes, certainly that's probably largely impacted by the fact that Inter Miami looks like they're going to be the team that won it and ultimately did. It clearly looks like they want to get Messi involved in this tournament. And so they're going to do what it takes to get Miami to this tournament. I will say it's just reporting. It's not been confirmed. It's only been reported by one journalist, as far as I can tell. So still subject to change. But again, it's the international window. So let's just have some fun with this and assume it's true. Inter Miami will get the second to last spot in this tournament. There is still one unspoken for spot that will go to the Copa Libertadores winner of over the next couple months, and every other spot is taken. What's your instant reaction to this?
By the way, there needs to be a public service announcement at the top of this podcast to make sure we don't get quoted in any of the journalist articles moving forward. But instant reaction, I'm actually excited for this. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's a great opportunity for Inter Miami to actually showcase their ability at the global level. We are sort of siloed into that MLS bracket for good measure and don't necessarily have the same level of exposure to European football, to English football, and this would be our opportunity to go out and play competitively with some of these big teams, big name players. And I'm excited by that opportunity. Allows some of our Barcelona boys to go out and be a little bit more competitive with players that they've previously gone up against or even played with. I know there's going to be a lot of controversy, and we're sure going to get into that because it's going to add games to the calendar for the MLS. It's going to fall right in the middle of the season. And overall, I think, especially from the European fans' perspective, this seems like a more money-grabbing move by FIFA. But I do think for the MLS, for CONCACAF, for this side of the world when it comes to football, it's a great opportunity to go out and expose yourself to some of the other teams, some of the other leagues, and some of the other football styles. I'm very excited by this, if I'm being honest.
Are you more excited about what it means for the tournament or what it means more broadly speaking? Because Inter Miami's not going to be the favorite in a tournament that includes Real Madrid or Juventus and Bayern Munich and PSG and Manchester City and Chelsea. It is very much going to be one of the bottom half of the teams. Maybe I should get into how this is going to work. For those that aren't too familiar with this, the 2025 Club World Cup is the first expanded version. It will include 32 teams, of which I think 13 come from UEFA. And so there's going to be some of the biggest clubs in the world. Again, clubs from Italy, clubs from England, clubs from Portugal and Germany and France and Italy. And it's going to have some of the best talent in the world and some of the best teams in the world, best coaches, etc. But it's also going to have a distribution of talent in terms of teams from across the globe. And that includes from CONCACAF, where we will send 5 teams to that tournament, we being CONCACAF, 2 from the MLS, 1 already qualified through the CONCACAF Champions League in 2022, that being the Seattle Sounders. A couple of Mexican clubs have also grabbed spots in this tournament. But as the host nation, and it is going to be in the U.S., we are entitled to, we now being the U.S., are entitled to 1 host team. And so it seems like Inter Miami is going to claim that spot. It's great to be involved. And it is cool. And I know you're a big Manchester United fan. You wouldn't probably be that interested in this tournament if it wasn't for Inter Miami getting in. I certainly wouldn't, because my favorite club in Europe is also not going to be a part of this tournament. So it would sort of be on the side off my radar. And now I get to be fully invested in it because my team is a part of it. So from that perspective, on the field, I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it would go under the radar, but I think there's just something about being involved in the first of its kind expansion tournament of the Club World Cup. Previously, it's always been the English teams or some of the bigger European teams, someone who wins the Champions League, goes into the Club World Cup, straight into the, I believe, round of 16 or quarterfinals. They don't even get to play the group stages. And it's just a brush away for them because they can easily get to the final and win. And honestly, at that point, it's basically guaranteed that whoever wins the Champions League should end up winning the Club World Cup. And that doesn't have any competitive edge.
The UEFA Champions League.
Yes, the UEFA Champions League. Apologies, I'm using the general vernacular in this case. But the UEFA Champions League winners always tend to win the Club World Cup for, better or for worse. And it just, there's no interest in it. And now it's an expanded version. The qualification criteria is different as well. And again, it's our team going into the Club World Cup, playing against teams that we've never played before. And that's exciting in itself. Some new games, some new competition. It's going to be really interesting to match up against some of these teams and see where Inter Miami really stands. Because I agree with you, we're not going to be the favorites. I don't expect us to win this tournament or go far in this tournament. But just in terms of the exposure that we'll get in terms of the ability when it comes to the football aspect to test ourselves against some of the best teams, that's a very exciting prospect. And as fans, it's really important to see different matchups and see your team play against some of these big heavyweights of European football.
Yeah, and not even just Europe. Again, there's 12 spots in Europe, and just quickly, it's Chelsea, Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern Munich, PSG, Inter Milan, Porto, Benfica, Dortmund, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, and RB Salzburg. So aside from RB Salzburg, it's some of the biggest clubs in the world. But even the South American clubs, Palmeiras and Flamengo and Fluminense and River Plate and Boca Juniors and whoever wins this Copa Libertadores, those are going to be teams of much bigger and better quality than anything Inter Miami's ever dealt with before.
Yeah,
and even some of these African country clubs, Al Ahly, which is the 3-time champion of the African Champions League, 3 out of the last 4 years, is going to be there, and that is not a team that Inter Miami is just going to match up and dominate. Same thing with some of these Asian clubs, right? Al Hilal, which is the club that we faced in the preseason last year. That was the one we lost 4-3, I think. But it was competitive, but also they didn't have Neymar. They didn't have everything going for them. So even the teams that are sort of in the bottom half in terms of reputation and quality are still very, very good teams. And so it is going to be an incredibly difficult tournament. I think just looking competent there would be a huge success. We can talk about that more in a few minutes, but and even the Mexican clubs that are going to be there, Monterrey, who we went up head to head with, we couldn't really compete with. So it will be very difficult from a footballing perspective, but it is World Cup style. So 8 groups of 4, 2 teams from each group will advance out of the group stage into the round of 16. It'll be 3 games in the group stage, best 2 get out, and then from there it'll be knockout style. It'll really matter what Inter Miami team shows up. Like I said, the Seattle Sounders, the other MLS team that will be going, they are nothing like the team that qualified a few years ago. Even the team that qualified really struggled in that season. They were already sort of a dying team, and a lot of their best players have either moved on or really aged out of their prime. And so it'll be very difficult for them to be competitive. It's already difficult for them to be ultra competitive in the MLS. And this is just part of the MLS sort of roster construction. It makes it very difficult for teams to build dynasties that consistently compete at the top level of the league. So what Inter Miami actually looks like next summer is going to play a huge part. We will have Lionel Messi. We will have Busquets. We will have, in all likelihood, Jordi Alba. We'll have a lot of these young players that are a part of this 22 under 22, not Diego Gomez, but the rest of them. Julian Gressel, some veterans. But how can we get this team into a position so that it can compete best for next season, for that tournament next season? Because all the heavy lifting for that in terms of improving the roster is going to have to come this winter window. Yeah,
squad depth will be absolutely essential. We talk about this Inter Miami team and constantly refer to the squad and how important the depth of this team is. And we've been phenomenal in terms of building the depth of this roster. That's going to take an exponential uplift next season because now we're going to be playing more games. There's going to be a lot more minutes that all the players need to cover, more competitions to play in, and I feel like players are going to be a lot more knackered due to travel, due to our league form being in the middle of the league while also having an eye on the Club World Cup. So overall, the transfer strategy needs to be focused on building the squad depth. We will be keeping an eye on the Club World Cup when developing the transfer strategy and making sure that the quality that we bring in is not just for the future, but can actually uplift the team at this point in time. And I see you have a bit of a reaction, so I'll let you take over from there.
I think, we're still going to have to follow MLS roster rules, right? And all of those are still going to be in place.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, the MLS is prone to change the rules sort of on a whim. So maybe we'll get a 4th DP or something to that nature. But we should assume it's going to be under this general framework, which means it's going to be hard to build sort of real quality depth beyond what we've already done, which is sort of incredible by MLS standards. But that doesn't mean we can't add 1 or 2 really high-level players And so I'm thinking about it in a different perspective. Go get a really high-level right back that can help you compete there and shore up your defense. Go get a right-sided center back that can help you in that situation. Go get a left winger that is of a quality that can compete with that sort of level of competition so that you can be competitive there. That's sort of along the lines of what I'm thinking. And it doesn't have to be Angel Di Maria or Neymar or, a name like that. It could just be, Cesar Montes or David Martinez but just a player that clearly is a step above what we would normally expect in the MLS, but also something that could maybe compete at that sort of level.
No, in fact, you're actually touching upon the exact point that I was trying to make, and you did it much better. Is we can't just recruit for the future for this upcoming season. We need to keep an eye on the quality as well. So I completely agree with you in that sense that a lot of our acquisitions should at least focus on being able to compete with some of these bigger teams and bring in a quality player in all positions, so that when you move from one player onto the next in the same position, there's not a quality dip. I don't know if you saw a video that Sky Sports recently put out talking about the rules of the FIFA World Cup, Club World Cup, and how it's going to play out. And apparently FIFA has mandated teams to put out their strongest 11, whatever that means. They are cognizant of the fact that this might be treated as an afterthought by some of the bigger clubs who will be moving towards the end of their season. So they are going to actually enforce the rule that best players need to play if they're available. And based on that, they've actually instituted this interim transfer rule or transfer window, where during the course of the tournament, I believe after the first stage, the group stage, there will be an interim transfer window between June 27th and July 3rd, where teams will be allowed to replace players in their squad. So this is a weird system. I think it's focused on trying to bring out the best quality players from each club and making sure that they put the best foot forward. So in that sense, we won't have the luxury of playing some of our youngsters or trying to justify that we're putting out our first 11 when we might be playing our young, academy prospects, for instance. So that's going to be important, keeping that in mind.
I just want to clarify something you just said, because I think it's actually beyond that. There's actually going to be a window between June 1st and June 10th. That's before the tournament starts. That would normally be outside of the normal UEFA window. But I just want to remind you that FIFA is telling people they should open for that, but it's still going to be open up to the individual federations. And so just because it feels like all the UEFA teams and nations are going to let their clubs do that doesn't necessarily mean the MLS or the U.S. Soccer Federation is going to let their clubs do that. But certainly it would be a huge advantage for Inter Miami if they had a separate third window during the year where they could bring in new players just to compete in that tournament, but then obviously keep them beyond that point, especially if we have an injury or something like that where we need to replace a player. As far as starting your best teams, though, Inter Miami is going to go out there to compete, because if they don't, they're going to get embarrassed. That's certainly something more to deal with Manchester City and Real Madrid and teams like that. As far as, but getting back to this building the roster question, what would you like to see in terms of projecting into the future, right? We know who's going to be here for the most part. We know who's at least a question mark, and we know who's not going to be here. With that in mind, what would you like to see us do in this winter transfer window in order to try and build this team up so that it can compete at that level of a tournament?
I think there are... Okay, so the younger players are already in good shape. A lot of them are going to be here, barring Diego Gomez. We have a few question marks about some players, whether we're going to keep them on or not. For instance, Matthias Rojas, Chelo Wigan. And I think there are very obvious positions where we can upgrade players. And that's what I want Inter Miami to do. Build your core around, of course, your Barcelona boys and the youth.
Give me some positions, man. Don't just leave it.
You're putting me on the spot here.
Yes,
I'm gonna keep it general now. I'll give you positions. Right back, you've already mentioned. We need a quality right back. I would actually go as far to say as we need a quality left back as well, to give Jordi Alba some respite, given how many games we're actually going to play. Depending on what happens with Suarez, bring me a striker, bring me a defender, and bring me a midfielder. So that's basically across the pitch. We're basically upgrading all players, but Centre back is very important. Striker is very important. And the midfield is very important. Build a spine. Bring in quality in those positions. I don't know if we keep David Martinez. I don't know if we keep Matias Rojas. I don't know if Suarez is going to play another season. So
Martinez
for me,
will
the
be here.
spine is the most important.
David Martinez will be
Hopefully,
here because
yes.
he's on loan up until
Yeah.
the end of June. So he will be here no matter what, unless he's injured or something.
Okay.
But his loan doesn't end until after that tournament ends. No, I think you make a great point. And I also think this tournament could be a great way to help Inter Miami recruit players. And obviously playing with Lionel Messi has been a huge attraction to these players, especially in South America, that probably never would have considered the MLS. Guys like Chelo Wigan, guys like Matias Rojas. Julian Gressel wouldn't be at Inter Miami if it wasn't for Messi and Tata Martino and Federico Redondo, Diego Gomez. Like, all of these players came in part because there was this huge attraction that only existed at Inter Miami that didn't really exist anywhere else. And we're going to get a second one of those this upcoming transfer window in the Club World Cup, if and when it becomes confirmed that we're going to be playing in that, because guys are going to want to be a part of this. And we just mentioned 12 of the best teams in Europe are going to participate, but Bayer Leverkusen's not going to be there, and Manchester United is not going to be there, and Tottenham's not going to be there, and AC Milan's not going to be there. And so,
can't believe you put Tottenham in the same list as some of the other clubs. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I guess my point is, in terms of being an individual player and wanting to play at a prestigious tournament that you're going to be able to tell your kids and grandkids about, Inter Miami is going to be able to provide that. And a lot of these other clubs, well, almost no one else in the MLS is going to be able to. And so when we look at adding huge talents, yes, we want to be competitive in this tournament, but it's also going to hugely help trying to defend the Supporter Shield, trying to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup in the early part of next year. I don't know if we're going to partake in the U.S. Open Cup or in the Leagues Cup because of this tournament. I'm sure something will be sacrificed in order for Inter Miami to participate. But then again, second half of the season and getting into the playoffs. And so it just feels like this huge advantage that Inter Miami is going to once again be able to take advantage of if they go out and are aggressive in bringing in these top level players. And I think that type of incentive makes it a lot easier to make a decision on Chelo Wigan, because if you don't have this and you're just going for the same goals you went for this year, you probably do bring Chelo Wigan back.
Yeah.
But if you know you have huge incentives to bring in a better right back, right? A guy that's starting at Boca Juniors, for example, or that sort of level, you're going to want to go bring that guy in if it's possible. And so certainly if you're Inter Miami, you got to be pursuing those types of deals. And it's only going to help make us a better team when we play in the other competitions where we will be not just there, but competitive and trying to win, right? Okay. So I think in terms of recruitment, it's
just
huge.
To make another point in that, just to make another point on the recruitment aspect of it, if and when we get confirmed, I think the entire transfer strategy pivots based on what's going to happen in the Club World Cup. But also, I'm not sure how this would play out based on MLS rules and how this would affect our general transfer strategy of bringing in players. But it brings in revenue. You're going to get TV revenue. You're going to get money from participating in some of these. Yeah, I know, but it may give us a little bit of financial leeway, and that's something that I think we would love to look into and understand how that affects us. But it could potentially affect our future acquisition strategy as well, and give us a little bit of financial freedom in that sense. But again, MLS is a little bit different when it comes to these things, so I don't know how much it actually translates.
Yeah, certainly the Moss brothers are able to put in a lot more money than most, or than the MLS rules would allow them to. And so if we get a fourth DP, they can shoot really big. They can pay a big transfer fee or whatever. But in terms of like using that money and directly investing it into the team, it's not really going to work that way. And the Moss brothers are not hurting for finances at this point. And if they are, then, that doesn't concern me as much. I'm on the side of the players and the fans, not the billionaires, but I appreciate what you do. But before I go any further, I just see here in the chat, Circus Fun saying that he's sitting in complete darkness in the eye of the storm. Thanks for doing the show. Thanks for listening, man, and be safe. And, come back for our next show and let us know that you got through everything okay. Fortunately, neither of us are in Florida right now to worry about this. And so we get to do this show and sleep peacefully tonight. But for everyone that's not, again, be safe and come tell us next time that you survived and everything is okay. Okay, let's talk about the brand because while I don't care about the pocketbooks of the Moss brothers, I do care about the prestige of Inter Miami as a brand because as we're talking about recruiting players in the future, as we're talking about building a team that can dominate locally, right? Yes, having Messi helps. Yes, having being in this type of tournament helps, but also being the most well-known team in the MLS and potentially the most well-known team in the entire North American Federation is a level of prestige that's also going to help you attract players, right? The Galaxy, which prior to the last 16 months was the most well-known team in the U.S., was able to attract David Beckham and Zlatan Ibrahimovic and guys like that. And so for Inter Miami to continue building this brand awareness and the prestige attached to it, I think is also really cool. And I thought we should talk about that for a minute because to me, that's actually one of the coolest parts of this. So Inter Miami is establishing itself as the team when it comes to the MLS. And that's awesome.
Yeah, and the way I'm looking at it is two aspects. One you just mentioned, the brand aspect of it, right? The commercial value, the marketing power of actually being involved in a tournament like this, being one of two American teams, US teams, and a few of the CONCACAF teams actually being able to go there and present yourself is a huge opportunity just to bring more eyes on MLS as a league. Because let's be honest, yes, we have diehard fans here, but you want more eyes on your league, right? You want more eyes on your team. And a lot of the casual fans who may be tuning in to watch Real Madrid play, to watch Dortmund play, to watch Juventus play, might look at Inter Miami and that prestige, the ability to showcase what your club is actually capable of, what MLS is actually capable of, is invaluable because you might put on a really good performance against someone like, let's say, Dortmund, and automatically someone who's a casual fan thinks to themselves, oh, this is a great game. They've done really well here. And they get into MLS, they start watching Inter Miami more regularly, and that just brings more fans, that just brings more commercial value to the club and just markets MLS as a brand overall, but also Inter Miami, man. Everyone wants to watch Messi play. Everyone wants to see what Inter Miami is truly about, and people who are not regularly catching Inter Miami games would now get the opportunity to see them live as well.
I think it's more than that, though. And I'll make an analogy. If you go to any city in the world and you walk around long enough, you'll see someone wearing a Yankees hat. And they might not even know what it represents, but it's just such an iconic symbol that you will see it. And I mean, you go to Rome, you go to Tokyo, you go to Nairobi, you will see a Yankees hat if you walk around long enough. It is actually kind of unbelievable that like this holds true, but like it does in a weird way. And you would never see that for the Boston Red Sox or the Los Angeles Dodgers or some of the other sort of most well-known baseball teams in the world. It's only the Yankees. And I think Inter Miami has a chance to become that for American soccer, where it's not just number one in terms of brand recognition across the world, but it's just on an entirely different tier compared to even the LA Galaxy or NYCFC or LAFC or some of the other clubs that are trying to build a global sort of brand. Inter Miami can put itself on another tier, just entirely separate and above and beyond. And that can only lead to good things if well managed. And so being in a tournament like this is another step in putting yourself in the hearts and minds of people across the world, which again is only going to help Inter Miami long term.
Yeah, and then I think the second aspect of that, and maybe this is more selfish than anything else, it may not add to the brand value of the club as such, but still prestigious, is the footballing side of things, right? I alluded to this a little bit, but imagine Yannick Bright going up against Vinicius Jr. I know that he's probably going to get rinsed and it's going to be a difficult matchup, but it's such a source of pride and prestige for us as fans to say that, oh, one of our young players who we value so highly is now playing against some of these stalwarts of the footballing world. And in that sense, going up against some of these giant teams is also going to be very important. But again, it all comes down to how we perform and how we're able to compare to some of these teams. But I think it's phenomenal footballing wise as well to be able to test ourselves against some of these big teams.
Okay, let's talk about it competitively, because we've talked a lot about what it means to be a part of this tournament, what it means for roster building, and how that could impact the rest of the season in terms of our league run and form, and doing good things in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and building a team, right? If we build a team that can compete with some of the best teams in the world, we will certainly have a really fun time when we're going back and playing against Atlanta United, right? So that could be really cool. But let's actually talk about the tournament, because there's a very good chance that we are in a 4-team group that includes 2 teams from Europe. And as I mentioned, aside from Salzburg, it is 11 of the 15, 18 biggest clubs in the world. Does Inter Miami have a chance to be competitive in this tournament? I think we can all say that winning this tournament is not the goal or even like the dream, right? But in terms of looking competent and being competitive, and in terms of, progressing, how realistic is that?
Not very, let's be honest. It all comes down to who we're drawn up against and who we actually have a group against. And again, this is tournament football. A team like Morocco can go out, or a team like Switzerland can beat France in the Euros and progress to the semifinals or the quarterfinals. So anything is possible, and we're going to have to be really, really on top of our game. One aspect of this is that we're going to be in the middle of our season, while some of these teams are actually going to be towards the end of their season and finishing their season. So they're going to be exhausted, they're going to be tired, they're going to be burnt out to a large extent. And Inter Miami is going to be getting into the groove of mid-season football. So in that sense, we are going to be ready and sharp, I think. But even then, it's a far reach for us to even consider being able to get out of the group. And a lot of that is going to have to do with luck, what our actual goals are, and what the resilience of the team is playing against some of these big teams, and the teams that we're drawn up against. And also Tata's tactics. Very important.
I'm tempted to say that the conventional wisdom about this is wrong, and that Inter Miami could, at least for a single game, compete with anyone. And before anyone crucifies me for this, here's what I will ask you. When Inter Miami plays Real Madrid, who's the best player on the pitch?
Jude Bellingham, Vinicius Jr.,
You
Kylian Mbappe.
You think it might be Lionel Messi still?
No.
You don't think so? So I guess this is where we disagree. Is I think there's a chance that we get on the field with them, and 10 or 9 of their, maybe you can throw Busquets in there if you want, but the vast majority of best players are on their bench and then in their starting lineup, but that there's a chance that we have the best player. And if you have the best player, you can get a goal. And if you can get a goal, you can get a 1-1 draw, or you can get a 1-0 result. That to me feels more possible, and I think people are giving it credit for. I don't think Inter Miami could consistently compete with any of these teams like 2, 3, 4, 5 games, and that's why I think making a run in this tournament is not feasible. But in terms of having a single performance where they compete and actually look like they belong on the field, I actually think it's more possible than people are giving it credit for. I do think there's a chance that Lionel Messi is still the best player on the pitch when they go up against, okay, maybe not Real Madrid, but Porto, right? Or Benfica, right? Or Palmeiras, or a club that we would expect to be defeated by and are definitely worse than, but that on a single special night, Lionel Messi has the magic. And I do think that's more possible than I think people are going to give it credit for. But, maybe I'm the crazy one. Probably I'm the crazy one.
You definitely are the crazy one, because, my friend, we have not even been able to beat Atlanta this season, let alone Real Madrid or Porto. But thinking of it realistically, right, I don't want to entertain the possibility of Inter Miami even going toe-to-toe against some of these big teams, because I don't think it's that likely. We are potentially going to be very, very much the underdogs in that situation. But the best way to actually beat some of these big teams is having a good defense. I don't think it's about having Lionel Messi as your playmaker. Of course, that makes a difference and gives you the ability to get that one magic moment to get ahead in the game. But defense is going to be key. Defense is going to be important. And throughout the tournament, that's what we need to rely on. If our transfer strategy helps us build a really good defense, then I would maybe even consider the remote possibility of entertaining the fact that we can go toe-to-toe with some of these teams. But overall, it's highly unlikely. But then again, weirder things have happened in the world of football, and
I will also say
it's all about the day, man. It's all about the
I
day.
will also say we won't have to be dealing with traveling like these other teams will.
Yeah.
Being like, I really think people are gonna underestimate what Inter Miami is at least capable of if things go right for them. Because again, I'm sorry, Lionel Messi is the best player that Porto would have, no doubt about it. And so would Sergio Busquets, and so would Jordi Alba. Like the best players play for Inter Miami. And yes, their DM, which is, by the way, Eustachio plays defensive midfield for Porto. Like he's fine. He's a good player for Canada. He's not Sergio Busquets. He's just not. And so and again, I am probably the crazy one, but if you catch them in a little bit of a lull and they're underestimating what Inter Miami is capable of, I think Inter Miami can pull a really, really impressive single performance. And of course, once you do that, the rest of the teams will be on notice, and you probably won't get it a second time. I also think on the flip side, it makes it very difficult for us to beat one of the other lower rated teams, because they're going to be playing their best game with Lionel Messi on the pitch, and they're going to be expecting Inter Miami to be sort of what Lionel Messi is. And I think if we play a sort of Al-Ali or a Pachuca or a Wydad, they would be giving us the type of game that they probably would reserve for the biggest clubs, the European clubs and the South American clubs. They would give that to us too, because we have Lionel Messi. So it goes both ways. But I think to just assume we're going to lose every game 4-0 is probably wrong. I think.
No, I don't think I don't think anybody's saying that. But it's about a lot of things going in our favor and a lot of things going right for us to actually be able to have the opportunity to progress beyond the group stage. Whether it's making sure we're injury free, making sure that the group that we're brought into is an easy group to get through, getting the tactics right on the day, every player having the game of their life against, if you say Real Madrid or Dortmund, every single player on that pitch for him into Miami needs to have an absolute stalwart of a game to be able even get a result out of it. So, and let's not forget, draws are possible. So maybe we get a draw or two. But again,
what makes you so pessimistic? Because what we know about Inter Miami is they have really two moments of comparison. We can compare them to Pachuca. I'm sorry, not Pachuca, to Monterrey, who we played head to head, right? But we did that with a lot of injuries. We did it without Lionel Messi for the first leg. We did it with, we were missing Robert Taylor and we had a bunch of guys that were missing for that series, and we were competitive with them, especially in the first game at home, right? And so that didn't feel to me like a team that was going to blow us out at our place if we have a fully healthy roster. Does that mean we beat them 10 out of 10 times? No. But it feels like a team we can compete with. And then we did the Saudi Arabian tour where when we had Messi in the first game, we lost 4-3, but that was a really competitive game. And when we didn't have Messi, it was 6-1, and it was not so competitive. And so, again, I think and they were in midseason form and we were in preseason form, and I think that plays a huge role in it. So I just think that, call me crazy, and you're more than welcome to all call me crazy, but I think Inter Miami can at least compete with a lot of these teams once they get there. Like you said, if they're healthy and sort of in good form and all of that. And I also think you're right. You have to add center back, like a quality center back or two, to feel good about your defense. You might want to add a left winger that has a ton of pace or that's really skilled on the ball. Like, I'm not saying Inter Miami's there today, but I do think that we can get to a more competitive spot than sort of what the general thought is. Certainly, I think we'll put a better show on than the Seattle Sounders. So that's also my basis for comparison.
We might not be the worst team in the tournament. Hopefully not. I am being overly pessimistic. Sorry. I do want to clarify this. And again, I would never count against my team when they're playing the tournament. Every single prediction that I make is going to be an Inter Miami win, or maybe a draw, but in favor of Inter Miami. But at this point in time, it's about the sample size, man. It's about the kind of teams that we played. And It just feels like we're not there yet, at least. And I don't know if we ever will be, but it seems like a big mountain to climb. I saw Porto draw 3-3 against Man United 2 weeks ago, and I don't know if Inter Miami can handle that level of competition yet. But again, it's about how we build into the next season, how we upgrade certain positions, and how we evolve as a team. Because let's be honest, a team can beat any good individual player on the day. So if we can become a well-drilled, solid team that is hard to beat, then why not?
I will just add that Lionel Messi would also be the best player on Manchester United. So, just proving my point.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
Okay, so what is success at this tournament? Because I think there's a lot of different ways to define success, and let's talk about those. But let's start with just competitively on the field in this tournament. What would be like a success? What would be like best possible scenario? And what would be considered sort of a failure?
I think success would be putting on a good show in terms of playing good football and not being blown out by every team that we go up against, maybe even getting a win or two, and just showcasing what our football style is. Because at the end of the day, you have a lot of eyes on you. The world is watching when you play against some of these teams, and you want to be able to showcase what your team is made of and what you're capable of. Play exciting football, play good football, and be competitive, man. I think being competitive is a minimum requirement. Don't just roll over for any of the teams that you play against. And I don't expect Inter Miami to do that. So at least that baseline level, I expect us to be competitive. And then get out of the group stage. That's a big success for me.
When we played Al Nassr in the preseason, not Al Nassr, Al Hilal in the preseason, it was really quickly 3-1, I think, and then Inter Miami bounced back and tied it 3-3, and then Al Hilal won it in like the 89th minute 4-3. But it was an incredibly competitive, entertaining game. Like that feels like it's reasonable to expect at least a performance like that. And even against some of the better teams, again, even when we look at the European clubs, yes, PSG and Bayern Munich and Man City and Real Madrid are a step ahead, but even some of these other sort of European teams, I think Inter Miami can at least expect to go in there and compete and not just get overwhelmed. And that might need Toto Aviles to improve his ability when he's under pressure. Or you can't play Toto Aviles in that game because he's not good under pressure. Like, yes, you're going to have to deal with certain situations like that or get personnel that can handle it, but it just feels like it's possible. For me, get at least one win and you're a success. And it doesn't have to be against a European club or anything like, or a South American club. It can be against Auckland. Well, maybe not Auckland City, but everyone else. And that's a success. If you are able to be competitive going into the last game, as in you're still alive going into the last game to get into the next round, I think that would be really cool because then you're going into 3 games with something to play for. That to me would be a huge success. And then to dream would be to get into the round of 16. I think that's sort of like the ultimate goal is to survive through the group stage. And that would be like a dream scenario. And anything beyond that is probably just us praying throughout the game that we don't get embarrassed, right? But like that feels realistic to me in terms of best case scenario.
Yeah, but even in that sense, you mentioned the Al Hilal game, and that was a very exciting game. But Inter Miami wasn't that great because the goals that we conceded, if I'm remembering correctly, were quite amateurish. So obviously don't do that. And that was in preseason, so I don't want to compare that either. But yes, put on a couple of exciting games, get one win, and that automatically just gets people's attentions, right? I still remember, I believe it was Japan against Germany or Japan against Belgium, where they were winning 2-0 or 1-0 for the entire game and then lost to Belgium towards the end. But everyone was still very impressed by how well Japan played and put on a good show. Do that against some of the better teams or against teams that you may be considered underdogs. So do that, put on some exciting football, be competitive in certain situations. And if you can get a win, that for me is a success. And most importantly, success for me would be no long-term injuries and not compromising the domestic season, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, you want to win that MLS Cup and be, get that trophy home
back-to-back champs
as well. Exactly. So we want to be back-to-back champs. You're very confident in today's podcast, and I'm very pessimistic in today's podcast, I feel like. But yes, don't compromise a domestic tournament, because we saw what happened with Columbus, and they fell off a little bit after the CONCACAF run and then the Leagues Cup. So
Yeah, Columbus has done a really good job actually of staying competitive. But I'm thinking about the Seattle Sounders, who a couple years ago went to the old format of the Club World Cup, and they had to play, I believe, Al Ahly for a chance to play Real Madrid. And the whole goal was like, let's just get on the same field as Real Madrid. And then they had a very disappointing 1-0 loss to Al Ahly and went home after one game, and it was very disappointing. So, from sort of a perspective, sort of appearance, I would love it if MLS came away, if we went away and MLS fans were proud of us. Because I think if Seattle went out there and was able to beat Al Ahly and go face Real Madrid and looked competent and lost 4-1, but at least we're not, getting absolutely smashed 8-0 or something like that. Like, I think everyone would have been proud of them and been happy with their tournament. And instead, they didn't even make it that far and sort of crashed out before they even really got started. So Inter Miami can go away with other teams in the league thinking they did exactly what we hoped they could do. I think from a perspective, that would be like a big win for Inter Miami. And then, like you said, don't compromise what we will be able to do after. What would you be willing to give up to be a part of this tournament? Because you've mentioned a couple times, and it is going to be a lot of games in terms of moving games around. We're going to have to move our MLS games out of that time window. The Leagues Cup might be right after that, maybe a couple weeks after that. That hasn't been decided yet. The U.S. Open Cup, we're not really sure where the MLS and the Open Cup stand right now and where Inter Miami might be factored into that. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, are you okay not doing the Leagues Cup if it means that we compete in this tournament?
Depends how good we are, because if we can go for the treble next season, then why not? You won that Leagues Cup or the US Open Cup, but I think we do have to sacrifice one tournament. Otherwise, it's going to be too much, too many games for these players, and it's just not humane asking all these players to perform physically at that level for so long. So I would be okay sacrificing the Leagues Cup if it means we have to go to the Club World Cup. And yeah, it's an opportunity that we may not get again for a while. So why not make the most of it? And if it means sacrificing the Leagues Cup for at least this season, then I'd be okay with that.
You're right. Inter Miami will probably never, ever compete in this tournament again, unless we win next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup. Would you be willing to give up next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup in order to compete in this tournament?
No, I don't think so. Nah, CONCACAF Champions Cup is something that's realistic within our grasp, and we can win it. And I think it's going to be one of those. If you tell me to rank the trophies, I will go as far to say as CONCACAF Champions Cup is very prestigious. So I would not give that up.
That would be the most prestigious tournament that Inter Miami could realistically win. And you would feel real bad about not being able to compete in that if we had to. This tournament is going to be 3 games. So it also could not be a huge distraction. I know for the general soccer discourse is mainly Eurocentric. And so people are talking about adding extra games and all this extra soccer and all that stuff. But and for them, it will be 3 games sort of after the end of their season. So their season is going to be extended by like a whole month and 2 months if they go all the way to the final. But for Inter Miami, it's not going to extend the schedule in terms of months of the year. It's going to be 3, if you're lucky, 4 games. And so I actually don't think it's too much for Inter Miami to handle. And it would be cool if MLS gave us a few advantages in terms of roster building in order to compete with that, with some of those teams, so that we can compete in all those tournaments. That would be lovely.
I feel like, and I don't know if you agree with me, but if Inter Miami makes it to the round of 16, the MLS should just make it clear that once we come back and when the Leagues Cup is on, we go straight to the finals, right? Just qualify for the finals. As long as we make it to the round of 16, get us qualified for the finals. That's what it should be, according to me.
Well, Francisco has a good comment in the chat. Remember the FIFA magic in the draws. Infantino might put us in a group with Auckland City, Salzburg, and River Plate. Let me just say, if that's your group, you can get out of that group. That's feasible. right? Of course, Salzburg and
It's
River Plate are going to be
difficult.
battles, but it's definitely realistic.
It's difficult, but it's realistic. It's not out of the realm of possibility. So I would say yes. Give me that group and I'll be happy.
How are you feeling about the team in general for that? Because we talked about positions you want to address. You kind of just mentioned everywhere, which I felt was kind of a cop out. But let's say we have Lionel Messi at right wing, we have Yannick Bright in the midfield, and Busquets and Jordi Alba, and maybe not Suarez, but maybe we can attract a new striker.
I like how you snuck in Yannick Bright in there.
Oh no, that was very intentional. I wanted to highlight him second, but no, seriously. And you throw in Drake Callender, and maybe you do have Suarez still, right? Where do you want to see this team like bulk up for that spot? Because and maybe a better question is, who do you trust from the current roster to play in that tournament, assuming you need 14, 15 players? And go ahead and include the coach if you want to.
Yeah. Not even talking about the coach here. Let's not. I might be on the same page as you on this. Obviously, the Barcelona boys have to be in there. No doubt in my mind. They are trustworthy people. People. Yannick Bright, I would actually trust to put on a good showing. I'm trying to think, man. Defending wise, I don't know. At this point, I feel good about Noah Allen, but I don't know if he's ready for that level of competition yet. Toto Avilés, no.
And remember,
Martinez, if he's healthy,
all the young guys,
yes.
all the young guys are going to grow a lot.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess I'm talking more about the veterans.
But you asked me how I feel about the team at this point in time, right? And if the tournament is tomorrow, let's say, I don't know if the youngsters are up for it yet, at least. David Martinez, if he's healthy, I would expect him to be ready, and I would actually trust him in defense. But I think we need to shore up 3 areas, and I'm going to give you specifics this time, not a cop-out.
Thank you.
Centre back, and midfield. Those are the 3 areas that we really need to show some quality upgrades in, because if our centre-back depth is not there, we're not going to be able to perform. We're just not going to be able to perform. We need quick, strong centre-backs who can play from the back and who can be press-resistant, can be good ball-playing centre-backs, because otherwise we have no chance. Put Sergio Busquets in the back line, our midfield's gone.
I'm thinking?
Put Sergio Busquets in the middle, our back line's gone. So you need 2 centre-backs.
I'm thinking that if you deliver that somehow, right, and you get 2 like true stud level centre-backs that can do all those things, we're going to be really hard to beat in the league.
The thing is, this is what I'm talking about, right? You build for the Club World Cup in the way that you want to go and win the Club World Cup, and then the MLS is just going to absolutely blow itself away.
That's the most exciting part to me, is that
exactly,
if they take it seriously and they try and build a team that can at least be competitive in that tournament, how that team's going to perform during the rest of the season is going to be phenomenal. Even when you look at the CONCACAF Champions Cup, right? The best teams in there are going to be struggling to survive in the Club World Cup. And so if you can build a team that can compete there, you're going to be the favorites to win everything again. Even Taylor Twellman won't be able to deny it.
Even Taylor Twellman won't be able to deny it. And you build those 2 center backs in terms of quality. You bring in 1 good midfielder. Doesn't have to be a superstar midfielder, but a midfielder who might be a similar style as Diego Gomez, who can do some of the box-to-box athletic running, can create opportunities in front of goal. And you're looking good in that sense. You're looking very, very good, because we don't need to boost up our front line. Of course, we need to, but if you look at it in terms of how we produce, we're fine there. And our biggest issues are our midfield and our back line. And I think Yannick Bright is going to be an absolute monster in a year. So we're going to be fine there. You just add 1 more number 8, Busquets, Bright, and that number 8 with 2 centre backs who are absolute studs. We're winning the lot, even the Club World Cup.
As we've had this conversation and I've been reading some of the chats, I do wonder what MLS might be willing to do in order to aid both us and Seattle in this tournament. Like, what are the odds that we have an agreement with Brighton to let us loan Diego Gomez for the summer when Brighton's season's over? Right? You see, you're shaking your head no, but like, is this that kind of special event around the world that teams are like, yeah, like these, like people are making exceptions all over the place. And, I see sign Sergio Ramos for a year and see what happens. Right. Paul Pogba is a name that has been linked to MLS teams over the past couple months, or I'm sorry, past couple days, because his suspension was pared down. I'm not saying any of those names are the right names, but I do wonder if we're going to get Inter Miami sign 3 players in that early June window for the rest of the season, and they come to compete in that tournament, bulk up our roster, and then we kind of just keep them for the rest of the year. And maybe they retire. Maybe it is Sergio Ramos and he retires at the end or whatever. Maybe it's Luis Suarez who takes the first 4 months off of the season and then comes back for that that right before that tournament starts. Like, I wonder if those types of things are going to be at play, or if it's going to be much more traditional, like basically every other tournament in the world is. And of course, it's too early to tell, but it'll be interesting.
I think there's a case to be made about MLS changing rules or allowing some leeway for this time, just so that the Miami and Sounders can actually compete. But it has to be across the board. It's going to be bending the rules. It's going to be a little bit unfair to the other MLS teams, and I'm not sure if that's going to.
I'm not even.
Them, but yeah,
I'm not even talking about MLS teams. I'm talking about like every team, right? Yeah. Like, is Man City going to try and recall their players that were on loan to try and bulk up their team for this turn? Maybe Man City's a bad example because they're so prestigious, but
they have 3 teams that are better than Inter Miami. Man.
Is Boca Juniors?
Let's be honest.
Okay, forget Man City. But if you're Boca Juniors, are you trying to sign free agents that just finished their season? And even though their season their contract might run out at the end of July, you work out a deal to bring them in 2 months early with their current club in order to be a part of this tournament. Like, those are the things I'm talking about. And that feels realistic for every team here, except for the 4 clubs in Europe that are the biggest clubs.
Really depends on how teams are viewing the tournament, but we'll see. We'll get closer to it and we'll figure out how teams are playing.
Right. And it's definitely too early to tell. I'm just sort of speculating and thinking aloud. But again, is that something that Brighton would want, to have a player at this tournament? Is that something that I see you're shaking your head? No, but I guess
because if you bring in Diego, he does not get a break then. He plays an entire Premier League season, full 30, 40 games, however the lot they play. And then you loan him out. He plays for the summer as well.
He'll only have been there for like 3-4 months.
Yeah, 3 more games. But
he'll be coming through, like, he'll be a bench player for them when he gets there, right? So it's not like he's going to have played a full European season, right? And again, it's only 3 games.
It's a very interesting question.
And again, if he does well, it could boost his profile and his value at Brighton. So, like, you can see how, and again, that's just an idea off the top of my head because we already know about Diego Gomez, but I do wonder if these types of little competitive advantages are things that teams are going to be pursuing or not, because this is like this is a first-time special event, and I am curious how teams are going to approach it. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's different than what we're used to.
We'll see. We're getting closer to it, so we'll see.
You really are pessimistic, man. Where's the fun? Like,
I don't know,
fun
man.
Opportunities and stuff.
I know, but I feel like I'm still in the MLS game modes and not the midweek chill episode mode. But I don't know. You're too optimistic for the both of us, and I'm a negative Nancy today. So apologies for that.
This is our midweek international episode where we get to have fun and talk about things that are in the future and might never even happen. We're not even 100% sure that Inter Miami is going to be at this tournament. So all of this is speculation and just.
I know what's going to happen. We're going to build a super team of 11 players who are just going to play in June. That's it. They're going to play in June, 3 games, and that's it. And then they're going to retire. And if that happens, if we get Sergio Ramos, if we get Paul Pogba, if we get a couple of more players of that quality and ilk, I would actually go out and say that Inter Miami does have potential to perform in this tournament, and I'll leave it at that. That's the level that I'm willing to go to. But it's an interesting thought. I hope the federations are listening to this podcast. I hope FIFA is listening to this podcast, because let's be honest, you want to have a even playing field for every single team that's part of this tournament. So make it as equitable as possible, and that's basically against FIFA's rules anyway. So we'll see.
Okay. Anything else before we wrap it up for this week?
No,
Any
I
last
think
Inter Miami thoughts
shape.
that are less pessimistic and less angry?
Yeah, we're winning the MLS Cup. What else do you want?
No, I'm happy with that. Okay, guys, there's no games this weekend, so we'll be back next week. We'll probably do a Wednesday episode, maybe something more playoff related, something or more roster related, but something in the more now, less fun, more nitty gritty, as
Something
we like
where
to do.
Scotty can't get clipped up and people call him an absolute crazy head.
The thing is, if you clip up someone making a wild prediction, you can call them crazy, but if it comes true, they look real smart. That's all I'm saying.
Genius.
So yeah, we'll be back next week, and then we'll get ready for that New England game with the pregame, postgame, and all that good stuff. And then we'll be into the playoffs, and it will be awesome. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. If you are in Florida and you're dealing with the storm right now, please stay safe. And again, come back for the next episode and let us know that you everything's okay, because we're thinking about you. We hope you have a wonderful night if you're not dealing with that, and we will see you guys next time. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.